Is it a good time to buy? This is the million-dollar question right now. And it's important that you know that there's a lot of factors that can answer this question. One very strong factor being personal opinion. However, personal opinion aside, one stat that I'd like for you to focus on is the number of houses that are being sold. Most importantly, let's take a step further back and look at what's going on in the US as a country so we can get an idea of the bigger picture. Now, I'll be uploading, and you should see on your screen an image that indicates how many houses have sold in the US year after year. And it's important that you know that these numbers are in the millions. Now, the most amount of houses ever sold, tracking all the way back to 1990, was in 2005. As you can see, sales have been coming up from 1990 up until 2005, where we experienced a peak of 7.1 million houses sold. Now, leading into the Great Recession, sales started dropping, and the lowest they ever reached was in 2008 when sales dropped to 4.1 million during that period. Now, as you'll notice, during the Great Recession, sales stayed very consistent in the fours up until 2013. If we were to round up 2014, where we could argue that sales were very consistent in the fives. From there, we experienced our most recent peak in modern time during 2021, during COVID. Now, it traditionally doesn't make sense because a lot of people were under the impression that when COVID occurred, sales were going to drop. Now, what you'll find is that interest rates were lowered, and by interest rates being lowered, so did monthly payments. And by monthly payments coming down, buyer interest spiked, leading the market to more sales. So again, we had 6.1 million houses sold in 2021. Following 2022, sales came down to 5 million, which, as someone in the industry, it did scare us, but it didn't necessarily terrify us because this is what we could argue was normal. What was absolutely terrifying was 2023 when sales came down to 4.1 million, which is very comparable to 2008. Now, I make the joke, and it's a very bad joke, that when the market was going up during COVID, everybody was getting their real estate license. And as the market came down, I argue that everybody ended up getting a job and left the real estate industry. Now, again, it's a very bad joke, but it's important to understand that there's an entire generation that was not in a position to buy in 2008, mainly because of age, that now is in a position to buy. And they're either living with a family member or they're renting. And we've seen what's going on with rent prices. As more people are renting, rent prices are going through the roof. And unfortunately, it's a vicious cycle because when you think about it, as rent prices, I mean, a mortgage payment will always or traditionally be above what rent prices are. If it was the contrary, typically everybody would buy, nobody would rent. So that's why it kind of makes sense that, buying requires a little bit more in monthly payment. However, once you buy a home with a fixed interest rate, you lock in your payment, excluding your property taxes and your home insurance, but you're locking in your principal and interest. And as rent prices continue to go up, eventually they come to a point where they're very, very similar, and it just makes sense to buy. And when it makes sense to buy, a lot of people tend to buy. So that causes prices to go up. And as prices go up, once again, we have that gap. So then people opt to just rent instead of buying. And then that increases demand, so rent prices keep going up, and it's just a vicious cycle. And all we have to do is just look 10 years back. If you look 10 years ago, look at what rent prices were and what home prices were. Then we look another 10 years before that and another 10 years before that. And we can see that historically, both rent payments and home prices have been going up year after year over a long term. Now, you'll notice that in 2024, there was also 4.1 million houses sold. 2025, there was also 4.1 million houses sold. So we could argue that we've had three 2008s back to back to back. And this year, we anticipate that it's going to be a year very similar to 2009, where we anticipate that sales will come slightly higher at 4.3 million houses across the US. Now, we all make the joke that if we could go back to 2008, we'd buy 10, 20 houses. We're basically there. So my question to you is, do you think this is a good time to buy, or do you think it's best to keep waiting? Either or, we're here to help. We'd love to know your answers. Leave them in the comments and feel free to contact us at 720-453-8370. Send us an email at rubenmb.k@kw.com. And as always, thank you so much for watching.